13.
O'clock.
Well, hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday night.
Yeah.
It's time for the regular ass show.
It's not a regular show. It's just it's the main show, the main live show at least.
We don't have anything.
Yeah.
We don't have regular shows.
Yeah, everything's a little bit different.
We just have irregular shows.
Yeah.
Tyler the guy says, "Fuck yeah, I love pirates."
Yeah.
Now, honestly, this was a really interesting story because I don't remember who it was that recommended this topic. It was a very long time ago, and I put it on the list, and I kept, shuffling stuff around, and it would like show up in the poll every now and then, but it never won. But then this past time, it finally did win, and I didn't hardly know anything about Gráinne O'Malley, and I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
She's kind of like a big folk hero in Ireland. There's actually even a statue of her in Dublin, I believe. And it's fascinating to me because she's just such a badass character. Like, she's just such a badass person. And it's kind of sad that a lot of the shit about her got lost. I think what happened was, for whatever reason, Irish historians kind of like erased her from history for a little while for various reasons, which we'll talk about in a bit. But she was so awesome, apparently, that her legend like lived on in folklore. And actually there were like some interactions between her and the English, which we'll also get into. And the English, like, so she turned up in all of their records. So she did exist and all of that other kind of stuff. Like, she was a real person.
She wasn't made up.
Right. Yeah. So they do know like a lot of stuff about her. But the thing about it that's interesting is that even stuff that had come through in like folklore, because it was like all of these kind of like songs about her and stuff, like from, because she lived in the 1500s. And they found out later on, just from various records and stuff, that a lot of the stuff that was like in folklore, that they're like, oh, that's made up. And it's like, no, that was probably true.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of the things that we grew up with believing is history were made up. Like Marco Polo. No, he's made up. The oldest book, and it's only very few scholars that know that Marco Polo is made up. I think it might be, maybe it's out now. The oldest mention of Marco Polo is in a fiction book. And in that book, they're finding dog heads and fucking people with faces on their chests and shit like that. It was something from it was a science fiction book from the Middle Ages. Like Star Wars. But there was no Marco Polo. Wild, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always kind of suspected, like some people got mad, I suspected that Joan of Arc might have been made up. But I think there's too much corroborating evidence. It's just, that tale just sounds too much like a religious fable. But I guess she was real. Or at least her existence was real. I don't know if all the stories about her were true.
Well, I think that's kind of true of any historical figure, because especially the farther removed you get from it, it's like, the more people are going to exaggerate or add to it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely the case with Gráinne O'Malley, although, like I said, they know for sure she did exist. I mean, if anything, she did meet with Queen Elizabeth, like there's records of that and all that kind of stuff. But there was, she came from like a very well-known clan.
Yeah.
In Ireland, and she wasn't just, I mean, you could dispute, because I think some people have disputed like maybe calling her a pirate, because they're like, well, how much like piracy did she actually do? But I don't know, I kind of feel like a lot of the stuff she did is absolutely could be considered pirates. It's weird because she kind of came from, oh, thank you, Bryce. This show always has high quality content. I've never heard of this woman. What a badass. I love stories of warrior women. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
This woman is pretty fucking cool, I gotta say. Like I said, I didn't really know anything about her. There have been a few female pirates throughout history. You got Anne Bonny, Mary Read, I think she was another one. And the interesting thing about Gráinne O'Malley, though, which is actually the anglicized version of her name, and I'm not even really gonna attempt to pronounce her original name, which I think her first name was actually pronounced Gráinne, as I think was how you pronounce it. But it's usually like anglicized as Gráinne O'Malley, like over here talking about it, because the shit is hard to pronounce, you know what I mean? Like all their names. But the thing about her that was interesting was that I kind of feel like female pirates, famous female pirates like Anne Bonny and stuff, I kind of feel like there was more of a thing where they would usually like dress as men or to get on board ships, and then they would be all badass and stuff. She didn't really ever pretend to be a man. She actually grew up. Her dad was also, I guess you could call her dad a pirate too, but her family was like really, really wealthy. Her dad was like a chieftain of the O'Malley clan, which was like a big deal. And they had like a lot of land and a lot of cattle and stuff like that. So they were very, very well off. And I think her mom was well off too, like their clan. So she came from a wealthy background and she was very educated, but apparently from a very young age, she was super into seafaring, even when she was a little girl, and that's all she ever wanted to do. And so because she was her dad's only child, she did have a stepbrother, I think, who was a little bit older, but she was like the only biological child. I guess he kind of like indulged her, like he let her, so he taught her to do all this stuff, like when she was a little kid. So she was like apparently pretty fucking badass, like as far as like sailing and everything goes.
Yeah, all the whole northern part of the UK, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, at this time, they're about half lawless. You could get away with a lot up there. They had laws, but they were kind of impotent, and people were kind of wild men. So I can imagine that a daughter of a wealthy person could probably have free reign of the place. She could probably do whatever she wanted.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we'll get into this in a little bit, but the laws between, and, she was kind of right in the middle of this whole conflict, like the 9 Years' War and all of that, between the English and the Irish. The Irish had their own thing going on. Like I said, they were usually run by clans who had chieftains, so it was almost like a warlord type of situation, whereas the English had more kind of like law like we would recognize nowadays. And the English, during the time that she was alive, that Grace O'Malley was alive, were kind of encroaching on the Irish, and a lot of the Irish didn't like it. And so she kind of got in the middle of all that as well.
To straighten out this whole cultural thing, the northern regions of the British Islands, including northern England, is pretty much the original rednecks. That's where a lot of redneck cracker culture came from, that. Because they were immigrating from there and coming into the United States, a lot of them in the South. And a lot of Southern culture, Southern from the American point of view, a lot of Southern culture has a genesis there in these northern regions. And shit that went out of style in the British Islands ended up continuing on into even the 1800s, early 1900s, like certain how we used English and certain English words and what people considered slang. A lot of that stuff came from Ireland or Wales, northern England, and so it's funny. You know what I mean? A lot of the stuff that Southerners do actually dates back to these areas, and it was wild. It was wild, man. It wasn't until much later the northern regions became more Anglicanized. They kind of started to become more like England, but that didn't reach the South. We even had Germans here that spoke archaic versions of German that long since died out back in Germany. So it's just that America was a weird way to kind of fossilize certain cultures. And some of the lawlessness of the South actually kind of came from these regions, Ireland and shit.
Yeah, they're kind of Mango's saying. I guess he's talking about Irish being kind of lawless or whatever. He said they still are.
Well, yeah. Well, it makes sense, man. They just got it in their genes, Me and Jenny, if you're an old timey Southern family, you got a lot of Irish blood in you, and just you're under all these damn pressures. They were lawless regions. Fucking multiple attempted genocides against them. They were trying to wipe each other out too, and all this clan warfare. It just promotes fucking psychopathy. Real short tempers, disregard for order. Really independent. It's just you can see it in Southern culture. It's just in people. It's hard to tell them what to do. They're going to tend to go, nah, I'm not going to do that. Now, there's been some integration over the decades, but shit, my grandparents' fucking generation in the South, they were like something out of the 1700s, 1800s, man. They did whatever the fuck they wanted.
Ben said feuds come from Irish tradition. Yeah, probably. Well, and that's the thing, too, is that one thing that the English did when they were trying to essentially, take over Ireland was they would do the divide and conquer strategy where they would try to like set the chieftains against one another. It's like, hey, if you fuck up this clan over here, like we'll give you all this land and shit like that. So they were trying to like set them against one another.
Yeah, I don't want to make the English look like the bad guys though. They had a lot to offer. They were good. The English were having the same problems with our people that the Romans were having. The Romans couldn't handle them either. It was just the nature of the beast. They were fucking. They were wild. They were independent. They didn't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, well, like I said, they each had their own kind of thing going on, and they most of the time I kind of feel like they had that shit sorted out. You know what I mean? They were just kind of like they had their own code of conduct and they had their own rules about shit. And they didn't really like somebody coming in there and telling them to do something else. Yeah. You know?
And even in Boston, some of the Irish neighborhoods that have been there for fucking hundreds of years, they're like something out of the South, just more urban. But they're also hot-blooded. They'll fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So are the Italians, but the Irish are fucking... Yeah, man. Fighters.
Yeah, Brace said, I read that Irish and Scottish clans used to raid the cattle of English farmers. Yeah, I don't doubt it. And the thing about it, too, is that Grace O'Malley and her family, like prior to that, they did that also. They would kind of raid anybody, though. Anybody that came trucking by, they're like, hey, you got any shit? Like, whether it was from Spain or anything like that. Another thing they did, which I thought was interesting, and I don't think I ever heard of any other pirates doing this, I'm sure some of them did, was that they essentially... made a toll road. You know what I mean? So like they would, like when ships would come by their territory, they'd be like, oh, you got to pay up, like, or we'll take all your shit.
Right, yeah.
Like they'd let the people go if they paid up, but they would exact a tax.
Well, you're going through their land.
Right.
You know, Indians did the same thing.
Right.
If you went through Indian territory, you broke their fucking their borders. You had to pay passage. Better give them something.
Like I said, it's like
or they'll just take everything from you. Right, like a toll road. Because you know, the Great Plains area here in the United States is kind of like the open sea. You know what I mean? Except you're on horses, but it was a lot like the sea, life on the sea. There was piracy and shit. Now we're gonna get into piracy. A lot of people kind of think pirates were criminals. They weren't. They were privateers. They were basically hired mercenaries. Now, other countries or other kingdoms would consider them to be criminals for the shit that they did to their ships. And sometimes they would do stuff that was illegal against their own countries, too. So, but in general, they were the contractors. They were the kind of like the military contractors of the day. It kind of lives on through American culture. If you join the U.S. Army, you become a private. You're a private soldier. You're being paid. A mercenary, basically. And a pirate was a privateer. He was being paid. A mercenary. So they're not really criminals.
I mean, some of them were, but some of them actually were sanctioned by their government.
Yeah, you had to get a license to do it.
Like most famously, Sir Francis Drake.
Yeah.
Probably the most famous one.
The country you served, I guess they were countries. They were more like kingdoms, you know. And in a kingdom, there wasn't really a concept of citizenry. It was just like a territory that was ruled by warlords and kings. But I guess you could call it a country. The borders tended to be kind of malleable. But when you became or wanted to become a pirate, you had to go before the officials and you had to buy a license to do this. And if you were working for England, they would say, yeah, you can raid the ships of France and Spain, but you got to give us a cut. You can't fuck with our ships. That's how it went. You had to serve us because they didn't have a big enough navy to do this. And these are specialized skills. These guys are like fucking commandos. They're not trying to sink a ship. They're trying to steal a ship, the whole fucking ship, if they could.
Yeah, they just want your shit.
Yeah. Now in the movies, they're always showing these big like Spanish galleons converted out to it. And there's your pirate ship. No, they used a thing called a sloop. It was a lot smaller. Something you could get up on you could outrun a big ship and then get on board with it, get on board, and you could board the ship and fight your way in. And usually they use threats, you know, like I don't know. We're gonna get into this later of how they did shit.
No, you can talk about it if you want to.
Basically, the first thing they did is they'd come under a false flag, usually, where they were flying a friendly flag, but then when they got up to them, they'd fucking pull the friendly flag down and put a fucking Jolly Roger up, and you know, each one, or a pirate flag, each one had a different symbol on it, you know, a devil with an hourglass, with, you know, that kind of stuff. And it was threats, you know. The longer you make us wait and the more men we lose, the more savage we're going to fucking be to your crew when we get on board. They really wanted them to surrender without a fight. Sometimes they did. But they would do things like try to destroy the sails of the ship to bring it to a halt, and then they'd board it. And they were fucking psychos. They used a lot of psychological warfare. Edward Teach or Edward Thatch, you know, Blackbeard, he was a good one. And then you had a whole bunch of other ones. Fucking shit. I'm coming to, what was the other guy's name? The guy that got elected. Some of them got elected to be the pirate captain, and they didn't, against his will, because he was a navigator. What was that guy's name? It doesn't matter now. But they were just contractors, military contractors at sea, and stealing shit and giving their king a cut. They had a lot of specialized skills.
Yeah, the thing about Gráinne O'Malley, like I said, there is kind of controversy over whether you could technically call her a pirate. I guess you can technically call her a pirate because she did do some piratey stuff. But the thing about it is that for a long time, her like official biography or whatever, I don't even think that was written until like the late 1970s. That's how kind of like obscure. She's not an obscure figure in folklore, but I think that people didn't really know much about her real life until, you know, later on, even though it had been preserved in English history. But the thing about it is that the reason why Irish historians didn't write about her, at least for a long time, is that they had the perception, which is a little bit erroneous, that she had cooperated with the English crown during the 9 Years' War. This is not entirely accurate. I mean, she did meet with Queen Elizabeth, and she did like ask her for shit, and she did promise her stuff, but she didn't do the shit that she said she was gonna do. And then like later on, she ended up like giving ships, I believe, to the Irish rebels. So you know, I kind of feel like she's a folk hero in Ireland nowadays because she was perceived as fighting for the cause of Irish independence, which she did, but it was like indirect, you know what I mean? Like she did a lot of swashbuckling type of stuff, but she didn't actually participate in the 9 Years' War, you know what I'm saying? But she did provide ships for the rebels and things of that nature. And so she did seem to be, you know, sympathetic to their cause, even though she did. The thing about her was that she seemed like, from everything that I read about her, she seemed like a very shrewd person. I mean, in the way that she kind of knew, I'm not going to say she was just out for her own self, because I don't think that's the case, but she was just really good at politics. She was really good at getting what she wanted. She was really good at playing people against one another. Like, she was just really good at that kind of stuff. And she seemed like she was really respected. Like, everybody that met her, men, women, everybody, thought she was awesome. You know what I mean? Like, just thought she was just like this amazing, amazing person. So, and like I said, there was songs written about her. There was all kind of shit, even like years and years after she died. And she lived like quite a long life. I think she died when she was in her 70s. Like, she died in 1603. But, you know, we'll get into like some of the piracy stuff. Some of the stuff, like I said, is they don't know if it's in 100% true. But the same stories do keep coming up. And some of the stuff was corroborated later on from like English records, so they do know that some of it happened. But this was, like I said, all during the mid to late 15th century is when all of this stuff was happening. So, as I said, Gráinne O'Malley, who, you know, like I said, Grace isn't her first name. That's just, her name is Gráinne, actually. And so I guess we'll call her that because that's what her name is. But she's kind of like, because, you know, like I said, the Irish historians had this perception that she had collaborated with the English crown, which they didn't like. And so they kind of like wrote her out of history a little bit. And I think there was also a perception that because she was a woman and she was doing shit that women weren't supposed to be doing back then, they kind of didn't want to talk about it either. I will note, though, that this was kind of interesting because I didn't actually know this. But apparently, in Irish law back then, and these laws go back to like way like pre-Middle Ages, like everything, they actually had laws, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and this was the Irish, the English didn't have this as far as I know, but they actually had laws granting the woman like equal status, like she was seen as like the husband's partner and not like property, you know what I mean? Because I feel like in England and other parts of the world, you know, if you married someone, you were like their property kind of. And Ireland apparently did not have that. However, they did still have they had kind of cultural things about like what a woman was supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Like you weren't really supposed to be out pirating or being on the sea. Well, yeah, they did, but I'm just saying that it's like it was a little bit looked askance at. Yeah. Even though on paper, you know, they were supposedly equal, like it was more egalitarian, but they still like it kind of expected women still to like, you know, marry and have children and do all of that stuff like normal.
Usually to get on to become part of a pirate crew, you'd had to have a military background. Usually you learned, like say in one of the Royal Navies, it might be the British Navy or French Navy or Spanish Navy. That's usually where you started. But then later you'd become a contractor, and well the Royal Navies were fucking strict. It was men only, brutal discipline. They were fucking, you know, they were savage. They would kill dudes at sea for pretty minor shit, keel hauling people and stuff. The pirate crews were kind of against that because they went through that already. They didn't want to put up with all that bullshit. All right, they had discipline, like you weren't supposed to fall asleep while you're on duty. Technically, you weren't supposed to be drinking on duty, but they did that.
Well, yeah, everybody did that anyway.
Yeah. And they were real lax about having women. They kind of, in general, a pirate crew would claim not to have any women, but if you looked at them, you'd see women in there. They'd just be kind of dressed in guys' clothing. All right. And it was because dudes wanted to go to sea with their girlfriends. Wouldn't you? You know? And some girls were ladies of the evening. They were women from port, and they got sick of that life. They wanted to fucking go out to sea.
Adventure on the high seas.
And they could still apply their trade at sea, too, and double dip. So they're getting a cut of the booties, what it's called, and the other guys are getting a cut of the booty, too. But they got to pay, you know. So there was that shit going on, too. I mean, think about it. If you're practical and you're a privateer and you're out there raiding ships, why wait to go back to port to get a prostitute? Why not have them on board?
Yeah, I mean, there's no rules or nothing. You're already a pirate.
Yeah, so they
just do what the fuck you want.
Right. So the whole fun of being a pirate. They would get girls that were kind of dual purpose that could work on the ship and as a pirate and as a pirate squeeze. You know what I mean? They did that too. Although most common it was, I think Calico Jack had two of his girlfriends on there with him. And I think they started out, I think his name was Calico Jack, I think. Some of you guys that might know this, I think because he wore that he dressed up. He was quite a dandy. I think his name was Calico Jack. He had two of his girlfriends with him. And they started off dressing as guys, but they just said, fuck it. They just started wearing women's dresses, like pirate women's dresses in front of the crew. The crew liked them anyway. They didn't care. Everybody knew. I think that's how that went. It's been a long time since I read those books.
Bryce said, I don't see anything wrong with her cooperating with the crown if she did. Her priority is her clan and no one else. Yeah, the thing about it, like I said, I think that's why it's a little unfair to say that she cooperated with the English crown. She didn't really. I mean, she really just did it to, like, we'll get into it a little bit, but there was this one motherfucker that was actually, like, under Queen Elizabeth that was after her and actually imprisoned a couple of her sons, and she actually just went to Queen Elizabeth saying, like, hey, tell that dude to, like, knock that shit off, and she was basically like, hey, I'll give you all these ships and all this other stuff, like, if you help me out, and Elizabeth said, yeah, but she never gave him any ships or nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she just promised that, like, to get what she wanted, like I said. The interesting thing is when she met Queen Elizabeth, like, Queen Elizabeth seemed like they were about the same age. I think Queen Elizabeth was a little bit older than her. They were both in their 50s at the time. And I think Queen Elizabeth was fascinated by her because everybody knew who she was. She was quite famous, like, in her day. And so, you know, she was quite legendary. So I feel like Queen Elizabeth was just, like, fascinated to meet her. You know what I mean? So it was this really kind of interesting meeting of these two kind of, like, legendary women. It was just kind of like I said, they were both in their 50s at that point, but it was just really interesting. So yeah. So I think part of the reason was, again, because she didn't really conform to the... And the thing about it, too, was that she came from a wealthy background. She came from, like, she was a chieftain's daughter, and there were certain expectations that went with that. She did meet some of those expectations. Like, she did marry like she was supposed to, and she had kids and all that other kind of stuff, but she just seemed like she just wanted to be a seafarer. She wanted to, you know, captain a ship, and she did it. And the thing, so she just... And it seems like her dad was okay with it. Like, he was just like, yeah, just do what the fuck you want.
Yeah, I was correct. His name is John Rackham, also known as Calico Jack. He was most remembered for having 2 female crew members. Their name was Mary Reed and Anne Bonny.
Yeah. That's who I just mentioned, but yeah. Both of them.
Now, if I remember correctly, they ended up in it was either Cuba or Puerto Rico, and they were facing the gallows. And I think the girls got off because they were pregnant. Or at least claimed
they did, yeah.
They got off, yeah.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, because I was actually going to mention them a little because those are like probably the most famous female pirates.
Yeah, so we got...
But yeah, they were going to hang them, but then they were both pregnant.
Ben's in there saying, oh, bullshit, everybody knew that women were bad luck. No, pirate ships had women on them. They didn't give a fuck. They were bad luck themselves. Nobody was... They said they would say shit like, that they weren't even afraid of the devil. You know, that the devil was afraid of them. You know, so they didn't care about bad luck. Dudes were fucking tough. They were the worst luck of all time. So what are they afraid of bad luck for?
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Although he did mention that a lot of it had to do with crew members getting revenge on the ships that they used to work on. That was part of the thing. Yeah, because there was a big class system. In the naval system back then, and you were like, fuck those dudes, man. Let's steal their shit.
Yeah. So, okay. So, as I mentioned, Grace O'Malley, or Gráinne, as we're calling her, because that's what her name is, her dad was named Owen O'Malley. That is also the anglicized version, because I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce what his actual name is. So, he was the chieftain, like I said, of the O'Malley clan, of Clew Bay, which is County Mayo. And apparently he had, unlike a lot of the Irish clans, the O'Malleys were very into seafaring. Like, they're pretty much their entire wealth and stuff like that had come from seafaring. Their entire living came from seafaring. They even had the motto of the O'Malley clan was, in Latin, Terra Marique Potens, powerful by land and sea. That's what they called it. So, so she came from, like, a long line of seafarers. The O'Malley clan had long been seafarers going back a long way, and that's how they pretty much made their fortune. They would go and raid, you know, Scotland, Spain. They would go all over the place and just raid shit, like I said. So they had, like, a lot of land. Now, as I said, there's some debate over whether they could be called pirates or not, but I kind of feel like, you know, yeah, they do have records that and there were actually, like, folklore that was later backed up with records that they did actually plunder as far as Spain and things like that. So, yeah, I guess you could technically call them pirates. And as I said, they would also do the thing where they would, if you came through their territory, they would make you pay. You know what I mean? It's like a toll road type of situation.
I think it was called paying grift, wasn't it? Or tariff? I think it was called grift or graft. Paying graft.
Something like that. But yeah, it's interesting because Grace O'Malley, Gráinne, she actually later on became known as the Pirate Queen of England, even though, like I said, it's debatable whether she was a pirate or not, but, you know, she did some piratey stuff, so I'm going to let it slide. Now, as I said, she did have an older stepbrother. I don't actually know if anybody knows what his name was.
Some ice in there.
But she was her parents pretty much like their only biological child. Now, I don't know. I've heard two stories about this. Either that the father raised her as a boy, or didn't really do that, but just kind of said, well, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like, it doesn't matter that you're a girl. You know what I mean? Whether it was either of those two things, it kind of like amounts to the same thing, I guess. Now, interestingly, because she was the daughter of a chieftain, one thing that they would do normally, and they don't actually know if Gráinne actually did this or not, but they said in Ireland, like if you were the child of a chieftain or the daughter of a chieftain, you would usually get sent out to be educated like with another clan, like under another chieftain, like they would educate you and then you would come back, you know what I mean? So I don't know if she actually did that, but they do know that she was actually quite educated, which more than a girl would be at the time. They know that she spoke Gaelic, they know that she spoke Latin, and they said probably she also spoke French and Spanish because she was very well traveled, and that was where they did a lot of their seafaring or piracy or whatever. So they said she probably spoke those languages as well. I don't know if she could actually write, but she could speak several languages. So apparently, the story goes that when she was a little girl, I've heard that she was maybe 10 or 11 or something like that. She wanted to go with her dad. He was going to go to Spain, I think, like to do some kind of, I don't know if he was doing piracy type of stuff, but he was just doing like a seafaring mission or whatever. And she really wanted to go. And she was still a little girl. And he didn't really want her to go because I guess, she's still a kid. So he's like, no. So I think the excuse that he gave her was like, well, you can't go because your long hair will get caught up in the rigging.
Yeah.
And apparently she was like, defiantly picked up a knife and cut off all of her hair.
She knew he was bullshitting.
So then, like, after that, they called her, I think in Gaelic or whatever, or Irish, it's Gráinne O'Malley, which means bald grace or bald Gráinne. Okay. Like, that's what they called her. And she's still known as that, like, sometimes. They don't know if she cut off all her hair or just cut it, like, super, super short.
Yeah, she probably just bobbed it.
Yeah. And her dad, like, he just thought that was so funny, I guess, or so badass, that he's like, okay, you can come with. So she did actually end up going. So, so the thing about it is that she grew up from a very young age on ships. So she learned everything about ships, about navigation. She was taught to fight. Pretty much everything, like from when 11 on. Now, as I said, she was still expected to marry. A lot of the clans would marry, like a lot of the kind of big up families did, like, for political reasons. And that's generally what happened with her first marriage. Now, she got married when she was... Oh, it's Pookie.
Yeah, Pookie's getting heavy. You're getting heavy. That's a polite way of saying you're getting fat.
Don't tell her that. You're going to give her a complex. Look at, she's making a mad face.
Yeah.
She's like, shut up, daddy. She's not fat. But yeah, so she was 16 or 17. And she married her first husband, whose name was Donald O'Flaherty. Now, this was like, the O'Flaherty clan was another kind of seafaring clan. And they were also allies of the O'Malleys, obviously. Now, by the time she was 16, she was already a very adept sailor. And over the course of their marriage, they were only married, I think, maybe 8 years, something like that. She actually ended up they had 3 children together. 2 sons, whose names were Owen and Murrow, and also had a daughter named Maeve. And then her first husband, and this is going to be a running theme, but her first husband was out hunting, and he got ambushed and murdered by another Irish clan, the Joyce clan.
Yeah, they did that kind of shit.
Because they did that kind of shit. Like I said, this will be a running theme. Like, that happened to, like, a lot of...
It was wild out there.
I guess. Grudges. You can't even go fucking hunting, man.
No,
it's like, there's that motherfucker.
Yeah, grudges and bad blood.
Yeah, so I don't know what he did to piss off the Joyce clan, but they got back at him. Yeah. So he just got fucking murdered.
That's where all that Hatfield McCoy shit fucking came from. That was here in the U.S.
Look at Pookie. She's like sitting there for a really long time. Tammy goes, Pookie.
Yeah.
Look at her sitting all still. What a good girl you're being.
She's trying to go off this way.
She's like...
Trying to fall down and get off, huh?
She's like, I don't know. I can't decide. She's like, he's sticking her hand in her face, and she's like...
Yeah. No, she likes to rub her nose on me.
Yeah. I mean, she does like for you
wiping
to, like...
her nose, a cold-ass fucking nose.
She likes to do that on my feet for some reason. Like, I'll be, like, sitting at my desk and not see her, and then, like, all of a sudden I feel this cold little nose, like, on my feet. So, yeah. So her husband, Donald, gets murdered, right? And then the Joyce clan are like, they have an idea. They're like, oh, well, the hubby's dead, so we're going to go and take Donald's castle because nobody's there now except for the little woman and the kids. You know what I mean? Guess what? Gráinne O'Malley whipped their asses. Okay. Like, they came and, like, tried to take the fucking castle. And she was not having it. She actually, her and her men, she fought them back.
She had security.
I heard that she actually melted down like some lead and shit like that in the castle and just dumped it on them, like when they came up. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was one like source.
That takes a while.
Yeah, so I don't know if she knew they were coming and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna give these motherfuckers. They'll never forget."
They would have had firearms, I think.
Yeah, this was, she was born in 1530.
Yeah, they would have had matchlocks.
So this was when she was, I think maybe 20. So this is about 1550, somewhere around there, 1550, 1555. But yeah, so apparently the counterattack was so fierce that they were just kind of like, okay, never mind. And the castle today is still known as Hen's Castle because she was protecting her children like a mother hen. Okay. I heard also that this might have been because her husband Donald, who was murdered, obviously, was called the Cock.
Yeah.
Either because he was an asshole, or because he just like ran around fucking anything that moved.
Right.
Or it could be both those things, I guess.
Probably both.
So I guess, like, jokingly, like, the people in the area would call it Cock's Castle, but after she fought back the Joyce clan and ran them off, then they started calling it Hen's Castle. And as far as I know, they still call it that nowadays, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, scholarly acts and reading books and long-term planning, that really wasn't in your advantage if you were a man living in that area at that time. What guaranteed your success is you had to exude a lot of masculinity. You had to fucking be fearsome. And evidently she could hang with the men.
Well, yeah, and the interesting thing about it is that even after Donald died, all of his men, she moved to Clare Island, which is kind of where they set their base up. I don't know if there was already a manor house or a castle there, or if she had one built or whatever, but she moved there with her family, and all of Donald's men went with her.
Yeah. Okay.
And they remained loyal to her like the rest of her life.
Yeah. That was actually a lot more common than people think. Dudes were loyal to queens. Evidently Queen Isabella was the shit. Everybody loved her. Guys were really willing to fucking die for her. Evidently were real good looking. But no, the female leadership was fucking common.
Yeah,
like some shit out of fucking, what was that Mad Max movie? Beyond Thunderdome. Remember fucking Auntie?
Yeah.
Fucking, it was that kind of situation. Tina Turner.
Yeah.
That was a good.
But she seemed to, like, even at this age, because she was still pretty young at this point. I think she was only in her 20s, early 20s. She already commanded the respect of, like, all this. I believe it was 200 men that she had. And they came with her, like, wherever she went, like, subsequently.
Women know how to charm dudes and get loyalty out of them.
Well, like I said, she knew how to do that. Yeah. She was very good at
You didn't want to let her down,
politics.
You know? She likes me. It's that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah. She's probably giving some out, too.
Well, I don't know about that. But, she was kind of like...
Women have to be fucking strategic with what she does.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. She was very, very strategic.
Yeah.
And like I said, she seemed, I don't know if I'd say charming or something like that, but she definitely knew how to get her way, and she knew how to, like, without being an asshole about it, because nobody said she was a bitch or nobody said
probably
nothing
reasonable.
like that. Yeah, I kind of feel like everybody was just, like, admired her. Like,
Yeah.
she was just, like, a very admirable person.
Probably just real reasonable.
Maybe
Like
so.
some of the best bosses I worked for were women.
Yeah.
They're just reasonable. Yeah, there wasn't an ego clash.
Yeah.
So it might have been.
Because you do get that a lot of times,
Yeah.
like, with dudes.
men. Yeah, dude. Yeah, he's the fucking main dude, and some of the guys underneath him, they might be rivals to him. They might be better looking
they
than him,
start
and
a whole
strong, and they're
little-
like, I gotta get this dude killed. If not, he'll take over.
Right.
So there's that kind of shit.
Because I feel like women get a bad rap of, like, oh, those bitches, and they're always, like, backbiting and
Nah.
everything. I think dudes are worse in that regard.
Yeah, guys are worse.
I mean, I'm not saying women don't do it too, because they do, but I'm just saying that I think dudes are worse. Like the way they
It depends, but
jockey for position. It
Yeah.
depends on the type of people that you're talking
Yeah,
about
right.
and the type of situation that it is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like everything else.
like
It's
everything
a lot
else.
more complicated than whatever. But yeah, so she goes to this castle and she's got like all of Donald's men who stayed with her like pretty much forever. She also had a shit ton of ships. I believe she had 20 ships. I also heard a story that her favorite one, she actually had the rope from the ship go all the way up to the window of her bedroom, and she had it like tied around her bedpost, so that if somebody tried to take it, like she'd be like, "What the fuck? Quit touching my ship!" Just her favorite one. I don't know if that's true, but that's like another story that I heard. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But yeah, because I guess they were like right on the sea, like where all their like right on the bay, like where all their ships were. Now, so they use these ships obviously for, exacting tribute, collecting tolls, things like that, and also piracy. And this is about where her epithet of the Pirate Queen name came about. Now, around this time, or a little bit before this, her dad, Owen O'Malley, had died. And it so happened that she essentially rose to the rank of chieftain of the O'Malley clan. I don't know how common that was. Usually, the thing about it, I was watching a video about this earlier, and they said normally, in the English system, they would have the royal families, and it was usually like the oldest son would automatically like inherit the title or whatever. Whereas in Ireland, it was more democratic, I guess. Like they would actually like elect the chieftain rather than it just being de facto like this person because they were the kid of the chieftain before. So I don't know if she just rose to the ranks because she was the only child, the only biological child of the chieftain, or because she was elected like everybody wanted her to be chieftain. But she did actually become chieftain of the clan like after that. So like I said, I'm not really sure how common that was for a woman to have that position. And so this is another interesting thing too. So at this point, she did marry again later, but I guess she's single at this point, or she's widowed, I guess we'll say that. Story goes that close by where her castle was, there was a shipwreck, and she said, I'm going to toddle on down there and see if they got anything I can swipe. You know what I mean? She's a pirate. So she's going to go check it out. So she goes down there, and she finds a sailor who is apparently injured, but is still alive. And apparently they're like, hey. And apparently they started a thing.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like I said, she was single at this point. She was widowed. It's fair. But yeah, so the two of them were lovers for quite a while. It's also rumored that she had an illegitimate son by him, but I don't know if that's the case or not. But again, as I said, this is going to be a running theme. He was also murdered by another clan, the McMahons. I guess, I don't know what he did to piss off the McMahons, but they saw him walking out and they said, look at that motherfucker. I hate that motherfucker. So they went and killed that guy too. So she's like, man, she is like 0 for 2 at this point.
It's like gang warfare.
I know, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like
she's like, man, that was a hot piece of dick right there. And it's like, they just
fucked it up.
They just saw him walking down the beach and was like, get that motherfucker. And they're just like, yeah, that's how it happened. It's a long time ago. We can talk about it like that. But yeah, I don't know how upset she was, like I said, but I just love the story. Like I said, I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the story about her going down to check out you know, whatever was in the shipwreck, see if she could like salvage some shit, and then seeing like a dude laying there, you know what I mean, and being like, hey, that's the best thing on here. I'm gonna take this home with me. But yeah, so it seems like she was kind of like that. But yeah. So apparently she was pretty mad about the McMahons killing her little bit on the side here, because when she found out who had killed the dude, she went and tracked them all down at Duna Castle and killed them right back.
Yeah.
She wiped them out. She killed the two. I don't know how many dudes it was, but she killed them. And
now she have her security detachment with her?
I'm not really sure. I would imagine so.
I wouldn't do that by yourself.
Yeah, that would be dumb.
A team of dudes in there, a commando raid.
But like I said,
those fuckers.
She was mad.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she went in there.
Ho's mad.
She's mad.
Ho's mad.
And this event, actually, she got a nickname, the Dark Lady of Duna, because Duna was the name of the castle where she went in there and like rubbed the dudes out.
Probably fucking
for
slipped
killing
in there
her
at night too.
for killing her boyfriend.
Yeah, probably nighttime raid.
Yeah, which still, I mean, like I said, she's pissed off. Don't get on her bad side, is what I'm saying.
Oh, they deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, that was a shitty thing to do, McMahon clan.
Yeah.
Jeez. So then, around 1566 or 1567, she married again. This dude, she married him mostly for strategic purposes, like political reasons. They don't seem to have been like in love or anything, although they did seem to be like good friends and good partners, like which we'll get into in a minute. His name was Richard Burke. He was known as Iron Richard, not probably for the reasons you might think, but it was actually for kind of a boring reason because he owned an ironworks, but that's why. Yeah, so he was a chieftain also in the Burke clan, obviously. And he was actually going to inherit a bunch of land, and he had a bunch of money, and the land that he was inheriting was like strategic, like she wanted it. So that's why she married him as well. Now, what they did, and I guess, I don't know how common this was at the time either. Like, you know, I've seen sources that said this was pretty common, but like I said, I don't know how true that is. So apparently, Gráinne and Iron Richard, they did a trial marriage, which I guess was something you could do back then, which this is actually like a good idea, where they would get married for a year, and then like if they decided that at the end of the year they didn't like each other, then they'd be like, all right, fuck off, and you fuck off, and then they just go their separate ways and it's all fine.
I heard about that.
Which, like I said, seems like a good, it's like a trial marriage. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like dating.
Right. But like more
moving in together.
But more official. Right. Yeah.
So moving in together is what it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and then after that, like, you could annul it, or if you decided to stay married, it's like, okay, fine, you're, like, married now forever.
Telling you, man, these people were more reasonable than you think they were. I mean...
Yeah, they, like I said, reading about, especially, like, the Irish, even though they have a reputation for being, like, these crazy, like, rebellious everything, but it's like some of the laws that they had, I'm like, well, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and it was a hodgepodge. It just depended on where you were and when. There's, you know, people weren't always fucking uptight, you know.
Yeah, I
kind
of feel like, depending on where you were, a lot of times people were pragmatic.
Yeah,
I kind of feel like.
I heard some stuff that some historians were saying that even during the time of the Spanish Inquisition in Spain, of Torquemada and everything, that they weren't that crazy. That a lot of other people were like, man, this Inquisition shit, you know, that's bullshit. You know, and evidently you could get away with quite a bit. You know, it wasn't like the church could just kill you or torture you. They had to have explicit shit that they needed to do, and evidently in the Inquisition, most of it was bullshit. Just trying to talk somebody into converting into the Catholicism. They didn't do anything to them. It was just, parts of it were kind of blown up into something that it wasn't. But evidently it was, even in Spain, people thought it was fucking, it was mostly happening, I think, in one city where that was happening. So it's just, you know, history kind of focuses in on one little chapter, but they don't give you the full fucking picture of what everybody thought about it, and they're like, hey, you know, this has only really happened in one city.
Well, the thing about it, and we've talked about this many times, is that from a historical standpoint, like, everything is so complicated. You're only really going to get a limited part of the picture because you're only getting the perspective of people who actually wrote shit down or, recorded stuff that happened. You're not getting, like, the mass opinion of, the unwashed masses who couldn't read or anything like that. Like I said, using that for an example, maybe when that was going on, maybe most people thought it was bullshit and hated it.
Evidently.
But they couldn't write, they couldn't, so their opinions have been forgotten or lost.
And then we generalized the Middle Ages a lot. There were certain places that were pretty good in the Middle Ages. Also, I heard that during the late Middle Ages, it was evidently pretty good. The food quality is pretty good. Sanitation was a lot better. It was almost kind of like the Renaissance, during the late Middle Ages. But like I said, it depended on where you were.
Yeah, that kind of depends on a lot of things. Yeah. Well, even nowadays, it's like, how good your life is. Yeah, that's going to depend on where you get born, isn't it? I mean, there's still a lot of shitty places in the world. So, and it was, I'm sure, the same back then. And not just, the environment that you lived in, but it was also, like, the people that were around you. Like, some people were cool and some people not so much.
Some cities were cool and some cities weren't. But I heard that from some historians were saying that late Middle Ages, some of those cities were quite mentally advanced. They were pretty scientific. They didn't have science down, but they were open to science. You know what I'm talking about? They were the beginnings of scientific thinking. And you could basically speak your mind and not have to worry about
getting your head chopped up.
Yeah, really, it just depended on what city you were in. Yeah.
Well, I've always been fascinated by the Renaissance period and the Enlightenment period, just because it was such a culmination of, I think people nowadays, because it was so long ago, tend to think of like the Renaissance or the Enlightenment as like one thing that happened. It's like, oh, suddenly everybody was smart and like
piecemeal.
But that it had been building up to that for like a really long time, and it just kind of like flowered out into. But there had been people saying that kind of shit for like a long time prior to that. It's just that it didn't really.
You had that Italian guy in the Middle Ages saying that there were aliens on other planets and the stars were the suns. They killed his ass for that.
They did, yeah.
What was his name? Giovanni or something?
Giordano Bruno.
Giordano Bruno.
Oh, we should do a show about him.
Yeah. And he was trying to convince everybody.
I read a couple of books about him. He's a fascinating man. Yeah. What they did to that dude was fucked up.
He wouldn't back off of it. He's like, no, the stars are other suns, and there could be other people around there. And they said, and what they got him on was like a type of blasphemy. They were saying, so what you're saying is that on those other planets, in order to save their souls, God must have made other Jesuses. And he's like, yeah. So you're saying there's more than one
in
Jesus.
Theory, I guess.
So multiple Jesuses, and that was too much. That was too much for them. So
they couldn't handle it.
So our Jesus isn't special. It's just one of the millions of Jesuses out there. Okay, you got to die.
They nailed his lips together.
Yeah,
and
that's
everything.
Crazy. He wouldn't back off of it though, which I think he's crazy. I said, "No, you're right. Yeah. I'm just talking out of my head."
Well, that's what I mean. He really was in. He's like, "No, I'm serious."
It's like, "No, man."
Yeah, I read a couple books about him, and it's like the shit that he said, because I read some of his writing and stuff like that. That blew my fucking mind. I'm like, holy crap, he was way ahead of his time.
You're right. Well, here's the thing: it couldn't have been just him.
That's what I mean. Nobody works in isolation, especially like nothing like that. There must have been a group of people,
or just people that were even separate.
People that were thinking the same thing,
and they were going,
because that's usually how it happens. Yeah. It's never just one person that comes up with something like de novo.
It can only mean that there was enough evidence out there in their fucking sphere to where you could put that together, that we're on a planet around a fucking sun, around a star, and those other stars have other planets around them, because they had a model of the solar system. So they were going like, we're not that special, and that's the church wasn't having that.
No, we are special. Shut up.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people, educated people, are like, yeah, we're not that special. We're on a rock, around a sun. This isn't a big deal, And the church wasn't going to have that, because that would take all their power away.
Yeah.
And their power,
like,
they have
that's
a lot
our
of
whole
money.
Shtick, man.
They had all that money and all that power. They weren't going to come out and say, well, our shit is kind of bullshit. That's not going to happen. Wall Street wouldn't do that. The Federal Reserve Bank wouldn't do that. They're going to fucking keep the scam going.
Well, a few years ago, I read a book. There's a great book called Freethinkers, which is actually about it's essentially it's about atheism, or like people that had atheistic ideas going back like thousands of years. And that's like really, if you read like some people's
the
works,
Greeks.
right, like from thousands of years ago, it sounds very modern.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the shit they were saying. And like you said, it's the same kind of stuff, like the same criticisms of religion and stuff like that you would hear nowadays. So it's, you know, it's not new, any of that stuff.
No. A Greek or a Roman, you could cut them loose today. If you teach them English, they'd fucking understand everything. They'd be using a computer and a phone in fucking a few days. We were talking about that the other day. Like, if you could bring somebody from any time period, like to the modern day, and how long it would take them to acclimate. And I said, well, I guess it would depend on what part of the world they came from, and it would depend on like what era they came from. Yeah.
I feel like the Greeks and Romans would probably get up to speed like pretty quick. Yeah. And you know, like I said, more recently, like people from the Enlightenment, they'd probably like only take a week or so, and they would
Egyptian might take them a little bit longer. Because they'd never even seen steam power before. Although they were pretty fucking advanced.
True.
They had a hieroglyphic alphabet, so it'd be easier to teach them an alphabet. And then as soon as they saw what was possible, you know, they were the kind of people, especially if they were educated, they'd be the kind of people they couldn't deny reality. They'd be like, okay, yeah, this is human progress. They would understand that immediately. How long has this been? Fucking 6,000 years, 5,000 years. Okay, yeah, that checks out. You know what I mean? Because the Egyptians had a grasp of time.
I always wondered what it would be like if you got like an ancient Egyptian and could bring them here in a time machine, and then like show them that like the Sphinx and shit was still there. And the like people were going.
I'd be impressed. Like, oh yeah.
They'd be like, "Holy shit, that's still there."
You let that shit fall. You blew it up. God damn it.
That's what I mean. They'd probably be mad. That looks so nice. What'd you do to it?
You know, remember from Planet of the Apes? And he sees
Y'all fucked it all up. It's all falling apart.
Yeah, when fucking Charlton Heston sees the fucking Statue of Liberty.
Well, yeah, everybody knows that. That's very, very famous. But it's like that would be super funny. Like, I wonder what they would say. That's actually what I was thinking. That's probably exactly what they would say, that we messed up. It's like, well, it doesn't look as good as it used to, like when I was a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, whatever it was.
I think the Egyptians would have figured it out. An elite Mesoamerican or an elite Mayan, you know, like an Aztec priest, one that was studying the calendar, would have the intellect to figure out modern technology. It'd be mind blowing to them though. They'd be worrying about the blood debt. Was the blood debt wasn't real? Oh shit! Cutting out all those hearts for nothing? You know?
Yeah. Either that, or he'd be like, "I need to cut some hearts out right now.
Yeah,
I'm way behind.
This sun's gonna fucking burn out any minute. The sun's gonna burn out any minute." Up.
Thank you very much, Jeffy Art. All throughout time, I'm sure there were a lot of smart, non-religious folks who just laid low and kept their heads down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
And especially back during certain time periods when you could get fucking burned at the stake for that shit, you might want to keep your mouth shut and just kind of like play along. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't blame anybody for doing that.
They were playing along, most of them, if you ask me.
I kind of feel like probably most of them were. You know? I don't know if a lot of them even believe that shit. Well, the thing about it was that, especially something like during the Middle Ages and stuff, one, a lot of those people were illiterate, and two, I kind of feel like they just had their own lives to worry about. I mean, their lives were probably not all that long and were kind of like difficult, so I imagine they were just worrying about like fucking, you know, their crops and that kind of crap. They weren't really worried about
kids.
Yeah, they were worried about more practical concerns. That's what I meant when I said most people are probably like pragmatic, you know what I mean? Because it's like they got life to live, they got shit to do. They can't just fart around worrying about
shoes had holes in them. They're worried about a new pair of shoes.
Right, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I feel like that's true in any era.
Yeah.
Most people just have their own problems and have their own lives to live and don't really think about like larger ideas or whatever. Ben said that happened in the Highlander TV show when Nefertiti was in Paris and saw the Luxor obelisks, and she was really confused and said she used to be able to see them out her window back home in 300 BC. Yeah, we moved that shit. Sorry. Yeah. She's like, "Why'd you put him here?" Yeah. But yeah. So, one thing I forgot to mention. It wasn't in my notes, but I heard it on another documentary that I was watching about Gráinne O'Malley, was that one thing when she was a kid still, like when she was a teenager, because remember I said that she started out on her dad's ship, like going out on, raids and stuff with him. And one story was that this one, like this other like a rival guy like came on the ship, and like her and her dad, like him and the dad fought, and the dad like kind of bested him for a second, but then he told Gráinne, he's like, hey, go downstairs, because she was just a little kid still, and he's like, just, you know, go down to the whatever, and then you know, just get out of the way while we're fighting. And so she sees it happen, but then she climbs up to she climbs up on the rigging or whatever, and then she sees the guy, or a different guy, like and he's gonna like stab her dad like in the back, and she jumped down and killed the dude. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's another story that I heard about her, and that's when she was like a teenager. So, and I forgot to mention that when I was talking about her, like her childhood or whatever. So okay, so we got distracted again, but so remember how we were saying like in Ireland you could do the trial marriage thing. So she marries Iron Richard, right? And then so a year goes by, and then he goes off to do some shit or whatever. And then he comes back home, and when he comes back home, so the story goes, Grace, or Gráinne, had changed the locks on his castle, and she like, so he comes up the driveway, or whatever you call it, and she leans out the window and basically says, you are dismissed. And she kept his fucking castle. And all his dudes and everything, which I thought that was so funny. But it couldn't have been as bad as that, because he actually, like, they did annul the marriage, but they stayed friends, and they stayed like partners. Like, they still did shit. Because I think under English law they were still considered married, but under Irish law they weren't, if I'm like reading that correctly. But so I guess he wasn't too mad. But see, that's crazy to me. She must have been cool, because to do that kind of cold-hearted shit, it's like he comes back, oh, hi, honey, I'm home. And she's like, fuck you. You're not coming back in this castle, motherfucker. And she's like changed all the locks and is like, yeah, get the fuck out of here. And then he's still like, you're still my buddy, though. Like, that's crazy. But so she must have been cool. But yeah. So the two of them actually did have a son together. And his name was Tibbet.
What kind of name is Tibbet?
Tibbet. Toby of the ship.
Is that what it is?
That was what his name meant. Now, the story about him, this is pretty badass too. The story about him goes, why he was called Toby of the ship, is because he was apparently born on a ship, like while his mom was obviously like captaining the thing. Now, according to the legend, either a few hours after he was born or the day after he was born, her ship was attacked by Algerian pirates. Now, Gráinne was down in the hold, or whatever they call it, with the baby. And her men were, like, fighting off the pirates, and she could hear up there, she's like, I think they're getting their asses kicked. Maybe I should, like, go help out. So it's either been, like, a few hours after she's given birth, or the day after she's given birth, she grabs her fucking swords and goes up there and helps them fight the pirates.
Yeah.
After she gave birth.
Well, she's not going to let the pirates have the baby.
Well, no, yeah, that's what I mean. That's
Right, yeah.
You don't fuck with a mom
right, yeah.
and the kid. So yeah, she's basically going up there and helped her dudes, and they fought the Algerian pirates off, and so then she just like, well, we got that over with, so then they just went back home.
Y'all girls fucking want to go to the hospital to have babies and lay around for fucking 5-6 months after. Back in the old days, those girls would give fucking birth in the middle of a rice paddy and throw the baby in the back. And you go right back to picking rice.
Just throw it in the backpack.
Throw it in the backpack, picking rice again. Boy, that was good.
Well,
Got
it's not like they really had much choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like...
Yeah. Fuck it, gotta fight the pirates.
She's like,
Watch
God
the
damn
baby."
it. Yeah. Somebody watch the like, don't let him roll off
Yeah.
the cot or whatever. I'm going to go up and kick these pirates' asses. But, yeah, that's fucking crazy to me. And she's probably just like, oh, God. She's like, I can't imagine. She's all torn up and shit. Because, yeah, that tears your shit up. So, I don't know what they did before. Well, they died in childbirth a lot of times is what they did.
Yeah.
Before the advent of modern medicine. So, there was that.
Yeah, the numbers on that were pretty good though too. The chances of dying in childbirth weren't that good. your chances are you survived a lot, you know.
Well, like I said, it depended on where you were.
Yeah.
Because
A lot of midwives knew how to do stuff. They could turn a baby around and they'd reach in there and turn a baby.
And they actually knew to like wash their fucking hands and
Yeah.
shit like that, which a lot of doctors didn't figure out until like later on.
So,
putting their stinky ass fingers all up in there. Gross.
but evidently, you know, I think most women throughout history just kind of squat down and fucking squeeze that out on a blanket. On a blanket.
Although I will note that a lot of women did die in childbirth. A lot of women did.
Yeah.
And even like wealthy women that presumably had access to the great.
Yeah,
a lot of things can go wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, women still die in childbirth nowadays, and we have
like I said,
supposedly
but you
great
gotta look
fucking-
at this the right way. The statistics of you surviving are very good. If not, the human species wouldn't have continued. The women that survived to have children were ones that descended from ones that survived to have children. They can have children.
Yeah.
A woman can have children. They're just like any other animal. Other animals die in childbirth too.
They do.
You know
But
what I
not
mean?
as well, I don't know if it's as often because
The problem is the head.
it's the head.
You're right.
I don't know if you guys know this, but the human head, the baby head,
Pretty big.
that's about as big as it can get, and it's because of our big ass brains.
Yeah.
Is what kills a lot of women in childbirth, because the brain, and that's also the reason why babies have to be taken care of for so long, which you don't usually see in the animal kingdom. It's like usually, you know, they squeeze out the babies. The babies are kind of helpless for a little bit, but not for that long. They usually figure shit out like birth. But human babies, you know, you got to take care of them for like years and years, and that's because the head, the baby head, that's as big as it can go, because it can't. If it gets any bigger, then it would kill every woman that it was like trying to come out of, because our hips can't get any wider.
Baby's head's kind of flexible though.
It is. It's squishy. Well, it's like when they're born, they still have the fontanelle on top, and it's like it's not fused in the middle, but still, I mean, baby heads are giant. It just still like blows my mind that like fucking shit comes out of there. I've seen it happen.
But they had women back in the ancient days, you know, 9, 10, 11 kids. No problem. Just squeeze them out, run that one right after another. But then they have other ones that they die for the first child. They die.
Well, yeah, like I said, it depends on a lot of things, because a lot of things can go wrong, and like I said, a lot of things go wrong nowadays too. But nowadays they can usually catch it if you have good health care, you know, which I know some people don't, but that's the thing.
It's a numbers game.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
nature is a number.
I mean, that's easy to say when it's like not you that you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when it's me, then I'm just gonna be like, yeah, I give a shit about that. Like I can say that statistics all I want.
I'm thinking about all those women along the whole track, like looking at it from Scientology over the thousands of years.
Oh God, don't bring that up.
Yeah, they mostly make it.
Yeah, it's fucked up. But I mean, there can be fewer, I think, badass things than just like popping out a kid and then going to fight some pirates like a couple hours later. That's like pretty rad, I gotta say. So yeah. Now, so what happened at this point? Like I said, this was during like right around the period of like the 9 Years' War between the English and the Irish. Now, Elizabeth I had come into power, and as I said, they were trying to like take over Ireland or like tame the Irish, whatever it was they were trying to do. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that they would do was doing like a divide and conquer type of thing. And Elizabeth I was kind of, I don't know if she was the engineer of this, but she was for sure, you know, into like doing it. They wanted to like suppress certain Irish clans that were more trouble than they were worth, let's put it that way. So they would kind of like give favors and land and shit like that to other Irish clans that would fuck up the troublesome Irish clans, you know what I mean? So they would kind of like sow discord within Ireland. They would do that kind of stuff. You know. So basically, there's, you know, and like I said, the Irish really did not want to be under English rule, and they did not like the English encroaching on them in this fashion. But indeed, the English were encroaching farther and farther. Now, in around 1578, I believe it was, there was a guy called the Earl of Desmond. And he decided, because, as I said, Grace O'Malley or Gráinne O'Malley was quite famous and was seen as, I guess, like a little bit of something of a troublemaker. So he actually had Gráinne arrested. And she was put in prison in Limerick for about a year. I think they actually moved her to Dublin later on. And I've heard two stories. I've heard she was released because of good behavior, but I've also heard that she escaped. So I don't know which one of those things is true. It is true, though, that she had kind of like, I don't know about a friend, but she had like a sympathetic person whose name was Sir Henry Sidney, and he was the Lord Deputy of Ireland. And he had actually met her and her son a few years previously, and again was a great admirer of hers. So I guess he maybe like engineered or helped out that she could get out. But people helped her get out, like I said, because she was well known and respected, like particularly around Ireland. And there were also some English aristocrats who admired her as well. So she even had, even among their quote unquote enemies, she had that as well. So basically, okay, so as I said, what they were trying to do, they were trying to bring Ireland under English law, which meant getting rid of the whole chieftain clan system, which the Irish have been doing for however long, hundreds and hundreds of years. Again, and the Irish were not happy about this. Now, in 1584, there's a guy, an English guy named Sir Richard Bingham, and he became Lord President of Connacht. I guess I'm pronouncing that. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's probably close enough. And he started trying to get rid of the whole chieftain system by basically he would do raids, he would do, I don't know if I'd say genocide, but he would go in there and like wipe people out. And then he would do like some other stuff, like he would bribe people and do, like I said, divide and conquer type shit, that kind of stuff. So that's what he was doing at this point. Now, Sir Richard Bingham was kind of like, I guess you could call him Gráinne O'Malley's like nemesis. Like the dude was, they were kind of at loggerheads like later on, right? So this whole thing that was happening, Gráinne did not like the shit that he was doing, so she basically started like rebelling against him along with others. And because of this, Bingham actually murdered her son, Owen, one of her sons. And her son with Iron Richard, Tibbet, also imprisoned him and her other son, Murrough, like by her first husband, and also imprisoned Gráinne's half-brother. Now, he also arrested Gráinne herself, but she got out somehow. But her sons and her half-brother are still in prison, and Owen was murdered, like her son. So she's a little bit aggravated by this. She's a little bit annoyed by this. All her sons are in prison, and one of them is dead. So you know what I mean? Now, Gráinne, even though prior to this, like when her shipwreck lover dude got killed, she just went to the castle and like wiped out the fuckers that did it. But this time around, I think she thought maybe that politics would be better. So what she decided to do was she said, well, I'm going to go, this Bingham motherfucker, he works for, essentially, Queen Elizabeth. So I'm going to go over his head. I'm going to go right to Elizabeth I, and I'm going to talk to her. So that's what she did. So she basically, like, she wrote to her, petitioned her, or whatever, like, to come see her. So basically what happens, so they bring Gráinne in. I don't know how long a period it was before, like, she asked for an audience and, like, how long it was prior to that. But they bring her in, and she dressed up all nice and everything like that. And they asked her, like, a series of 18 questions. And this is, like, apparently on record with the English records. And so she had to, like, write all this stuff out. And so she comes in to meet Queen Elizabeth. And one thing that she did, and I love that she did this and didn't get in trouble, she would not bow to her like you're supposed to, because she thought, well, we are equals.
Okay, you go to the queen. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Was
she a queen?
Well, she's the pirate queen. That's what they called her. So she was like, fuck that. I mean, which is a very Irish, that's a very Irish thing. She's like, I'm not bowing to you, motherfucker. I'm the same as you are.
I'm a queen, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she, well, like I said, she saw them as equals, so she's like, I'm not bowing to her. Fuck that.
Are there any descriptions of what she looked like?
There is a woodcut of her meeting Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard. Yeah, it's hard to tell like what she looked like.
I think this is just symbolic.
Probably.
The people that made those woodcuts probably never saw the original person. There's no
Yeah.
description of her though.
Not really. I've heard that.
Probably a big old fat girl. How much you want to bet?
Well, why would she be a big fat girl?
Because she's got all that kind of money and she can whip people's asses and probably well fed. I'm sure she's well fed. She's well fed all those kids.
I don't know how
back
much
in those days,
how much fighting and like seafaring you'd be doing like
days,
if you were super fat.
Back in those days,
She's out swashbuckling and shit. She couldn't be fat.
She was big fine, I bet you.
You're just wishing. What it is.
She was a BBW. How much I bet?
I don't know.
They probably would have thought that was very attractive. Because most people were skinny.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like cowboys. Cowboys like fat girls. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, all you gotta do is look at the saloon paintings that they had. They had big old fat girls. They liked big fine. Because they didn't see that. They just saw scrawny people.
Well, yeah, because everyone was like fucking eating hardtack and shit.
Yeah. Being fat was like the cowboy version of like having booty and implants.
Yeah, you could. Well, made it look like you had some money. And
you had
could
money
because you could feed yourself.
Well fed.
Like I said, everybody else. I don't know what you look like.
They call that shapely.
Sure.
Yeah, we call it fat, but they call it shapely. Yeah.
Well, it is a shape.
When I was in the army, we had cowboy dudes. And they like fat girls too. They're still into that. Skinny cowboy dudes with the fucking hats and the fucking belts. They had the fucking thing of their belt going down, almost down like halfway down their fucking thigh, like it was their dicks or something.
Jeez.
And they're going with a big old fat girl in a truck.
Oh my god.
Big 300-pound girl. Yeah. Never known for that shit, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm gonna get on you Islanders too, man. With all them Island boys, they like the big girls too. Yeah.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Everybody likes what they like, you know what I mean? Takes all kinds.
Micronesians and fucking Samoans and Hawaiians. They like fat girls, man.
Like I said, it looked like well fed.
Yeah. It's in the army with us. Man, not going to the club again. No, man, I'm not going. Why don't you come to the club, man? No, the girls are too skinny. Really? He goes, yeah. You know.
That's pretty funny.
I'm Samoan. We like fat girls.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so not only did Gráinne refuse to bow to Queen Elizabeth, apparently, according to legend, they also searched her and found a dagger on her. But she was like, "Oh no, man, I need that for my own protection." And Elizabeth said, "No, it's fine."
Yeah.
Like, and they just let her in there. Because, like I said, Elizabeth, it seems like, at least from the records that survive, was kind of fascinated by her.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, at this point, they were both about the same age. They were both in their 50s, like, when they met.
Well, she wanted to meet some other chick that had some mojo.
Yeah, I think the thing... Well, because Elizabeth, I mean, she'd kind of been a royal her whole entire life. She'd kind of been groomed, if you want to use that word, like to, you know, to be the queen and all this other kind of stuff. So she didn't have, I mean, I'm not saying, oh, poor her or anything like that, because obviously she had all the money and it's like, I don't feel sorry for her in any way. But in a lot of ways, their lives were very constrained. Like they, you know, they had all these rituals they had to do. They had all this stuff they had to do and everything like that. And I think she was fascinated by Gráinne because Gráinne just did whatever the fuck she pleased. Like, she didn't seem to have any... The interesting thing about her is that she seemed to, like, not just do whatever she wanted, but she didn't really seem to have any sanctions about that. Like, nobody seemed to get all up in her case about her not doing what women were supposed to do. I mean, she did do shit that she was supposed to do. Like, she did marry, like, for strategic purposes. She did have kids. She did all that other kind of stuff, but... She mostly, it seems like, just did whatever the hell she wanted, and she ran shit, and people were, like, fine with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Call it the Polynesians are coming out of the woodwork now.
Yeah, U.S. Polynesian women love thick women, yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you said. But yeah, so they had, like, a nice little chat, the two of them. And apparently they conducted the whole entire meeting in Latin, because that was the only language they had in common. You know, because obviously Queen Elizabeth did not speak Irish, and Gráinne, one thing I said that she either could not or would not speak English, so they conducted the whole thing in Latin because they could both speak that.
They met halfway.
Yeah.
Right.
So they talked for quite a while, and Gráinne was able to persuade the Queen, even though Bingham worked for Queen Elizabeth. She was able to persuade the Queen that her sons should be released, and that Bingham would get the fuck off her case, like would stop his campaign of terror against her. Like, he'd already killed one of her sons, but you know what I mean, obviously that couldn't be taken back. But so Elizabeth actually did go to Bingham, like gave Gráinne a letter that said, give this to Bingham, and it says you have to let like the captives go and all this other kind of stuff, which I'm sure Gráinne loved that. Here, motherfucker. Yeah. That's from the Queen. So I thought that was very funny. Now, one thing, and like I said, I think this is where the whole story about Gráinne like collaborating with the English crown went. I think one of the things that Gráinne did was she said, oh, well, in return, I will give you like a bunch of my ships and 200 men to help you like keep peace in Ireland, right? That's what she said. And she never did that shit though. Which I thought was really funny. So like I said, it's not like she was collaborating with, she was just trying to get her kids out of jail is what she was trying to do. I don't think she really gave a shit one way or the other about the conflict. I mean, yeah, she really cared a lot about Irish independence because she did give ships to like some rebels and stuff like that in that regard. But she was just saying whatever she needed to say, like, to get what she wanted. She's like, yeah, I'll totally give you all these ships and these dudes, like, to help you, like, quell rebellions in Ireland and stuff like that. But she never did it. But yeah, so Elizabeth did give her this letter, and so she had to go give it to Bingham. Now, Bingham, because he sounds like a real dick, he decides, he's like, oh, well, I guess the Queen said I have to, but he's going to drag his fucking feet, right? So he doesn't, like, let the prisoners out until a while. Because he argued to the Queen, and I hate to say it, but he was correct, that he's like, she's not going to do what she said she was going to do. She's not going to give you all those ships and those dudes and everything like that. And he was right about that. She didn't.
That would have been wasted, probably. Her advisor says, you can't give her that.
Yeah.
Those ships will never come back. They'll all be wasted in foreign wars.
I don't think Gráinne had any intention of giving those ships or those men to the English crown at all. I think she just said that because she wanted, like I said, she wanted her sons out of jail.
Okay.
And I think she was just using that as leverage. Oh, I'll give you all this stuff. And I don't think she had any intention of honoring that agreement. And I think, as much of a douche as Bingham sounds like, he was right about that. Because that's why it took him so long. He's like, I'm not letting these prisoners out because she's not going to do that shit. She's not going to give us the ships or the men. And she didn't. But he did eventually, like,
Queen probably didn't care.
Yeah. So like I said, she did end up giving some ships later on to the Irish rebel forces. So she did do that. So it did seem like she did give a shit about the cause of Irish independence. Although she didn't, I think some legend said that she had actually fought in the 9 Years' War herself. I don't think she actually did, at least not directly. But she did actually give support to, like, a lot of the Irish rebels. So there's that. So, basically, they don't really know, like, the last decade of her life, they don't really know much about her. There are records of a petition that she sent in 1595, and she was actually complaining about English troops that had that were quartered on her land, and she was not happy about it. So they do have that survives. So they do know that. They think she died in 1603, which is the same year that Queen Elizabeth died, coincidentally. And they think she probably died at Rockfleet Castle, which was the castle where she probably spent the last 10 years of her life. And so I've heard also that she kept on pirating, like, until she was in her 70s, like, up until she almost until her death. So, like I said, kind of a badass out there, like an elderly lady out there pirating ships, having babies, killing pirates.
Having babies in her 70s.
Having babies in her 70s. Yeah. No, that's not true. Yeah. But yeah, so basically, like I said, the what is she doing?
She's tearing books up. No, look. Then in defiance, she just does it harder.
Yeah. She doesn't. She's incorrigible. That one.
I complained about it. She just started ripping harder.
She's like, yeah, screw you, Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
She makes a face like.
Looked at me like, what? Stop it.
Ow.
Yeah. Turn it up. Okay.
But yeah, so they actually didn't really even write the definitive biography of her until 1979, and that was written by a woman named Anne Chambers. And I think after that biography came out, because I kind of feel like prior to that, she had largely been not completely forgotten, because she still lived on in like a lot of folklore. I think there's like there's some Irish ballads like about her and stuff like that. But I feel like she wasn't really known much outside of Ireland. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's not famous the way like Anne Bonny is famous, or like the way some other pirates are maybe famous. So I don't know. So like I said, I did find like a couple documentaries about her like on YouTube and stuff like that, but not really that many. And I hadn't actually heard of her until somebody recommended her like a while back.
If you actually go by the rule book, she wasn't a pirate. She never signed a privateer contract with
one of the sources that I read said that Elizabeth did actually give her
a contract.
Okay. For pirating.
Okay, then she was a pirate.
But yeah, so like just like Sir Francis Drake and shit like that had.
Right.
So I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that was one of the things that Elizabeth.
Most of the time,
this
is freelance stuff that she's doing.
Yeah.
Under the Irish flag, if there is such a thing. There probably was no Irish flag back there. Just clans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of feel like in the last probably 10, 20, 30 years, interest in her has really seems like it's, gotten a lot more.
Yeah.
Whereas, I feel like she's been forgotten prior to that.
Was Ireland actually unified?
At that time, I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, okay.
I don't believe so, no. Like I said, it was basically just a loose conglomeration of clans.
Clans and out in some
that all
lands.
had,
You're right, okay.
they had like enemies and collaborations and
so
shit
it's not
like
you could pirate or privateer for the Irish crown. There wasn't one.
Yeah, there was no such thing.
Right, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that Elizabeth gave her that like permission.
Yeah.
Like you can go pirating.
So they would have been like the federal government at the time, kind of.
Ben said Ireland was a confederation of kingdoms with a high king who was largely a figurehead.
Okay.
Around this time.
Okay.
Like I said, this is late 1500s is when this was all going on. Stop it, Pookie.
Man, you are defiant. Are you Irish? This is the world's only Irish cat. It's the world's only Irish cat.
Well,
Irish-American cat.
She's a Manx, so that's Scottish,
Yeah.
right?
I think so.
Which I guess is similar.
You are an Irish-American
she's
kitty.
like,
you look like a damn gummy bear.
She does look like a gummy bear.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that she is, one thing that she does, she jumps up on my counter in the bathroom, and I have like this kind of ceramic like thing, like jar thing, and it has like this metal decorative doohickey like on the top, on the lid, and she just loves to chew that, and I don't really like her chewing it because she's gonna break her damn teeth. It's metal.
Yeah.
And so she'll jump up on there, and I'm brushing her, and I can see her little eyes like going to that. She just can't resist it.
Yeah.
And she just very slowly kind of saunters over there, and I'm brushing, and then she kind of goes and she's like, I'm just rubbing on it. I'm just rubbing. I'm not. And then like when she thinks I'm not looking, like she's like, and then like, and then I'm like that. And I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
And then she looks at me in the mirror and she makes a little mad face.
Yeah. She knows what no is. She doesn't like no at all.
She absolutely does not.
Yeah.
Like she does not like to be. She is like a bratty.
Yeah.
Like 4-year-old. Even though she's 6.
Yeah, I guess
she's 6 years old.
Yeah.
But she is very much like a recalcitrant toddler. She just like does not.
Cat's a trip.
She does not like to be told no.
Yeah.
Like she'll grudgingly stop sometimes when you tell her, because she knows what no means, and she'll just like okay, but then she waits until you.
She doesn't understand why you're telling her no.
Right.
Like,
she's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. She wants to tear up any kind of leather boot or leather shoe, so you got to keep her away from. Got to lock all the boots and the shoes up, and you open up the closet. And she sneaks in there and lays down next to him, like I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then she
I'm just laying here.
And when you think she's not looking, she goes, I wasn't doing anything. Yeah, you try to fool me, but I know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think
it's
she
so
doesn't.
Funny. She tries to deceive.
I think she doesn't quite understand that we can hear her.
Yeah.
Like we know what that noise is.
Yeah.
Because she tries to act all slick.
Yeah.
Like when you're not, she'll do it when you're not looking, but then when you turn around, she's like, she acts all natural, like she wasn't doing anything, and looks kind of guilty.
It's hard to believe that a cat is capable of deception. I'm trying to play it off. I wasn't doing it.
I told you the funniest thing that she ever did in that regard was we have those little Sheba meat sticks that she likes, and we keep them in the side table or like the nightstand. And she knows where they are, so about the same time every night she'll toddle on over and like sit there next to the drawer and like look up at Daddy like meat stick time. Yeah. And the rule is that she can't have a new one until she finishes the old one, because when you give her one, you have to sit there and hold it like in your hand. If you drop it on the floor, she gets mad and she runs out. She's like, "You ruined it."
Yeah.
So you have to sit there and hold it until she eats it. And sometimes she'll just like sit there and lick it and like not eat it, and it takes forever. And it takes forever.
Yeah.
So then sometimes too, like she'll bite it down to the end, and then obviously you have to like drop it because you can't, there's no room left, and she'll bite you on the finger.
Yeah, she'll see that little thing. She'll go, "Fuck that, I don't want that."
And then she'll run off. Yeah. And then like later on she'll come back and want another one, and there's still like a piece of one like on the floor. Yeah. And Tom's like, "You have to eat that first before," and she knows what that means too. It's like you have to eat that one before you get a new one.
Yeah.
And I know that she knows what that means because sometimes she'll come in and very deliberately sit on it so you can't see it.
Yeah, she tries.
And then she'll look up at you with that cute little face, like, "It's time for a new one."
Yeah, and you push her off. What about that?
There's nothing.
And I'll push her off and I'll point at that one. She goes, "Oh,
shit, I got busted."
And then she'll eat it. She tries to hide it.
And then she'll eat it. But it's like it's so funny that she fucking does that. And like you said, that is indicative of higher reasoning, higher functioning. You have to be pretty smart to like try to deceive someone else, even though she's not super good at it. Yeah. Like obviously we know that she sat on the thing because obviously, but the fact that she would even think to do that and like think she could get away with it is like very, very funny to me.
Yeah, it was obvious to me because she was walking up to me and I saw a little piece on the ground and she gets it and it stands on it and then sits down. That wasn't there. I saw you. I saw you. Oh, okay, you got me.
She's trying to get a new one. It's like that's so fucking funny.
Yeah, she only tried it once.
Yeah, I mean, but still. Yeah. All right, so I guess how long have we been on? Just like an hour and 30 minutes. Yeah.
It's good to go.
John Gora said Italy didn't become a unified thing until like the 1910s or something. Yeah, it was like it was really recently, and I remember hearing that and like that kind of blowing my mind. But yeah.
Yeah, Germany was in a bunch of pieces till like the 30s, wasn't it?
Yeah, they didn't get their shit figured out until like way later on. All right, I guess we're gonna wrap it up because I gotta go to bed soon and all that other kind of stuff. So anyway, hopefully you guys found this story about Gráinne O'Malley as fascinating as I did. One of the few female pirates, I guess. So so thanks to, I can't remember who it was, so I apologize for that, like who it was that recommended it because it was a long time ago. But thank you for recommending that because I probably never would have come to it on my own, and I actually ended up being I thought it was like a really interesting story. So you know what I mean. All right, so yeah, Germany wasn't unified until 1989. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And what's his face from Knight Rider did it?
Yeah. The Hoff.
Yeah, there you go, David Hasselhoff. I couldn't remember his name.
David Hasselhoff unified it. Yeah, when I was talking about those, I was talking about Germany kind of reunified the Rhine. They said that was now Greater Germany, and there were German-speaking people in there. I don't know if that actually counted, and I think he merged Germany and Austria together, which I don't know what I don't think Austria considered itself to be Germany. Maybe most of the people there didn't, but I think it was even prior, like early 1900s, like prior to World War I. I think Germany was in a bunch of pieces. But I don't know. I got to go. I don't really know the history that well. A lot of it. Remember, the Ottoman Empire was really the main player during that time.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we're going to wrap it up for this evening.
Austro-Hungarian Empire too.
Yeah.
The other one. Right.
Gonna wrap it up for this evening.
Yeah.
So be sure to drop by again Friday night for the sidetrack show, where we're just going to drink and fart around and talk about whatever. So that should always be fun. So, yeah, please remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that other kind of stuff. And we will see you guys again on Friday night. Good night.